Claire Matthews had always believed nursing was a calling, not just a job. For 12 years, she had poured her soul into St. Mark's Hospital. Double shifts, sleepless nights, late meals eaten from vending machines. But she loved her patients. She knew their names, their stories, their quirks. She remembered birthdays. She brought comfort to the dying and laughter to the healing. She worked holidays and missed family dinners, believing that compassion never took a day off. Her supervisors praised her work ethic, her gentle hands, her calm under pressure. Claire thought she was safe, needed, valued. She wasn't. The pink slip came on a rainy Tuesday. She had barely stepped into the break room when her manager called her aside. The hospital was restructuring, they said, cutting costs, downsizing. Her role was no longer sustainable. It wasn't personal. Nothing ever was when money was involved. They thanked her in stiff, rehearsed words, handed her a final check, and escorted her out. Just like that. The air outside felt sharper than she remembered. Her scrubs, which once made her feel proud, now clung to her like a forgotten uniform. Claire stood on the steps of the hospital, unsure of where to go or what to do. It was only noon, yet it felt like the end of something large and final. Her phone buzzed with a message from her landlord. Rent was due next week. The irony cut deep. Claire walked. She wasn't even sure where. She wandered past familiar cafes, past the library where she used to study, past the grocery store she could no longer afford to shop at freely. Downtown was busier than usual. People brushed past her, some rushing, others idling. Life was moving on. No one noticed the nurse who had just lost everything. She reached a crosswalk and paused, waiting for the light to change. That's when it happened. A sharp thud followed by gasps. A man, maybe in his 60s, had collapsed to the ground a few feet ahead. His briefcase flew open, scattering papers. His face turned pale. His lips twitched. His hands trembled. People froze. Phones came out. No one stepped forward, but Claire did. She ran. Kneeling beside him, she placed 2 fingers against his neck. No pulse, no breath. Her instincts surged to life. "Call 911!" she shouted to the bystanders, who finally began to stir. She tilted his head back, cleared his airway, and started compressions. 1, 2, 3. She counted under her breath, pressing hard and fast. Sweat beaded on her forehead. His chest rose and fell as she gave 2 breaths, then back to compressions. Her body moved with precision, her mind in a focused rhythm, every second a war against death. Someone offered to help. She barked instructions. Another person said the ambulance was on its way. The man coughed. Claire paused. His eyes fluttered. She turned him on his side, checking his breathing again. Color slowly returned to his face. Relief washed over her, like a warm tide. The sirens approached, growing louder until the flashing lights bathed the street in red and white. Paramedics rushed over. Claire stepped back, letting them take over. One of them looked at her. "You're the one who did CPR?" She nodded silently. "You saved his life." They loaded the man into the ambulance, his hand briefly brushing hers as they closed the doors. Then they were gone. Claire stood there, still catching her breath. Her heart thumped, not just from adrenaline, but from something deeper. The fire in her that felt extinguished just hours ago had flared back to life. She had no job, no paycheck, no security. But she was still a nurse. No one asked her name, no one offered thanks. But as she walked away from that busy intersection, she wasn't angry or bitter anymore. She wasn't thinking about her rent, or the pink slip, or even the fact that she'd probably be eating ramen for dinner again. All she could think about was the faint pulse returning under her fingers, the breath filling his lungs, the life saved on a street corner by a nurse who had nothing left but the will to act. And that, for now, was enough. The morning light filtered weakly through the thin curtains of Claire's small apartment. She hadn't slept well. Her mind kept circling the previous day, not just the humiliation of being let go, but the man, his lifeless eyes, the moment he gasped for breath, the rush of paramedics. She had wandered home afterward like a ghost, arms limp at her sides, adrenaline long gone, but her heart still in overdrive. The coffee she poured that morning was cold before she remembered to drink it. Her laptop sat open, tabs full of job boards and LinkedIn searches, but she couldn't focus. Nothing made sense anymore. The hospital that had once been her second home had closed its doors on her without even looking back. And yet, despite it all, yesterday had reminded her why she became a nurse. It was never about the paycheck or the politics of the system. It was about people. It was about life. Even if no one had stayed to thank her. Even if she left that scene anonymously. Her thoughts were interrupted by a knock at the door. It wasn't tentative. It was firm, deliberate, like someone who knew. They needed to be there. Claire frowned. She wasn't expecting anyone. Her rent was paid for the moment. It wasn't the landlord. She opened the door cautiously. A tall man in a sleek black suit stood there, mid-30s, sharp eyes but kind expression. His suit looked expensive, subtle tailoring, real wool. In one hand, he held a white envelope. In the other, a dark engraved card. Behind him, parked on the curb, was a black luxury sedan with tinted windows. Claire blinked. "Claire Matthews?" he asked. Her guard went up. "Yes. I believe you saved my father's life yesterday." She stared at him, stunned. He extended the card. "My name is Daniel Foster. My father, Richard Foster, collapsed downtown. Heart attack. You administered CPR." Claire's breath caught. "He's alive." "He is. Thanks to you," Daniel said with a slight smile. "The doctor said if you hadn't stepped in when you did, he wouldn't have made it. You gave us back more time with him. That's something no one else could have done." Claire swallowed hard, emotion rising too quickly for her to hide. I'm just glad he's okay." Daniel held out the envelope. "My family wanted to thank you. This isn't a payment. It's a gift, a gesture. We tried to find you through the paramedics, but they didn't get your name. One of the bystanders had a video. We tracked you down through that." Claire's hand trembled slightly as she took the envelope. It was heavier than expected. She opened it cautiously and froze. Stacks of cash, neatly bundled. Her breath caught again. "There's 50,000 in there," Daniel said softly. "We wanted you to have it. No strings. Just gratitude." She shook her head slightly, overwhelmed. I can't accept this. I'm just a nurse." "I did. What anyone would have—" "No," Daniel interrupted gently. "You didn't do what anyone would have done. You did what you would do. And not because you were on duty or under contract. You stepped in because that's who you are. And that matters." Claire looked up at him, her eyes shining now. "You don't have to do this." "We want to." He handed her the card. It was engraved in gold foil. The Foster family. A private phone number was printed beneath. "If you ever need anything at all, call us." My sister's in charge of community outreach. My brother owns a real estate firm. My mother's on the board of 2 hospitals. We all owe you. Claire was speechless. The world had shifted beneath her feet again, but this time not in collapse. This time in awe. Daniel took a step back. One more thing. My father wants to meet you when he's well enough. You gave him a second chance. He wants to look you in the eye when he says thank you. Claire nodded slowly, the envelope clutched to her chest like a fragile thing. I'd like that. Daniel smiled again. Good. We'll be in touch. Then he turned, walked calmly to the car, and drove off, leaving Claire standing in the doorway of her modest apartment, stunned, grateful, overwhelmed. She stepped back inside, closing the door behind her, and stared at the envelope in her hands. $50,000. Enough to cover her rent for years. Enough to give her breathing room. Enough to start over. But more than the money, it was the gesture, the recognition, the sheer human gratitude. In one moment, she had gone from invisible to seen, from discarded to honored. And all because she hadn't walked away when it would have been easy to. She had acted without expectation. And now, somehow, the world was answering back. The sunlight through the window looked different now, warmer. She sat at the table and laid out the envelope, the card, and her quiet thoughts. For the first time in days, the knot in her chest loosened. She didn't know what would come next, but for the first time she didn't feel afraid. She felt hopeful. The next morning began like any other. Claire rose before the alarm, still wrapped in a haze of disbelief over what had happened the day before. The envelope sat on her kitchen table, untouched, since she counted the cash twice and then carefully placed it back inside. She hadn't spent a cent. Not yet. She didn't know what she was waiting for. Maybe to wake up and realize it had all been a strange dream. The knock on the door, the man in the suit, the life she saved, and the unimaginable gesture from strangers who had every reason to forget her and none to find her. Claire sipped her coffee slowly, gazing out the window at the quiet street below. It was a modest neighborhood, mostly retirees and young families. The kind of place where excitement was rare and gossip was currency. She was about to turn back toward her laptop, to resume her reluctant job search when a deep rumbling sound rose in the distance. At first, she dismissed it. Probably a garbage truck. But the rumble grew louder, steadier, and then split into several throaty purrs, the unmistakable sound of high-performance engines. Claire walked to the front door, coffee in hand, and opened it. She froze. 4 luxury cars, shining, immaculate, gleaming like they had just driven out of a showroom, lined the curb outside her house. A white Rolls-Royce, bold and pristine. A silver Bentley Continental, its chrome accents catching the morning sun. A deep blue Porsche Panamera, sleek and elegant. And at the far end, a black Tesla Model X, silent but commanding, its falcon wing, doors gently lifting open. She stepped out slowly, one hand shielding her eyes from the sunlight. Standing on the sidewalk were 4 people, Daniel Foster, and 3 others she didn't recognize immediately, but could easily guess were his siblings. Each of them was dressed in designer casual, effortless, tasteful, quietly powerful. Daniel stepped forward with a warm smile, holding a bouquet of fresh white lilies. "Good morning, Claire," he said, as he handed her the flowers. "We thought we'd stop by." Claire's jaw dropped slightly. I don't understand. What is all this?" "My brother likes to make statements, said the woman beside him with a soft chuckle. She was tall, with smart eyes and auburn hair pulled into a loose knot. "I'm Laura, by the way. I run the Foster Family Foundation. We've all been talking about you nonstop." "And I'm Marcus," said the man next to her, younger than Daniel, broad-shouldered and full of restless energy. "I own the Foster Motor Group. It's where these beauties came from." Claire looked again at the cars, her heart pounding. "You brought these here? Why?" Daniel placed a hand in his pocket, casual but sincere. "Because yesterday you told me you're just a nurse. You saved a life without being asked, without recognition, without knowing who he was. You stepped in because it's in your nature. Most people would have hesitated. You didn't, and we wanted to honor that in a way you would remember." Marcus gestured to the lineup. "Each one is yours to test. Take your time. Get in. Touch them. Drive them if you want. At the end, choose the one you want to keep." Claire blinked. "Keep?" He grinned. "Yes, Claire. Keep. It's yours. A gift. No catch. No publicity stunt. No cameras. Just us saying thank you." Laura stepped closer, her voice softer. "We know a gift like this won't fix everything. It won't undo the injustice of losing your job. It won't heal the pain. That comes from being treated like you don't matter. But sometimes, a grand gesture reminds someone that the world does see them, and that what they do does matter." Claire couldn't speak. Her throat had tightened too much. She looked from one car to the next, her brain struggling to process what was happening. The Bentley gleamed. The Porsche beckoned. The Rolls whispered class, and the Tesla, quiet and dignified, seemed the most surreal of them all. I don't know what to say," she whispered. "Don't say anything," Daniel replied. "Take your time. Take a drive if you want. We'll wait." So she did. Hands trembling, she walked to the Tesla, pressed the handle, and felt it give way smoothly. The interior smelled like luxury, fresh leather and brushed aluminum. She sat behind the wheel and stared at the futuristic dash. The door closed automatically. For a full minute, she didn't move. Then she reached forward and started the engine. Silent power surged to life. Claire pulled out of the driveway, barely aware of the neighbors peeking from behind curtains. She drove around the block, then through the winding streets she had walked so many times in worn-out sneakers. People waved at the car, probably thinking some celebrity had gotten lost. She drove past the hospital where she'd been dismissed just days ago, past the crosswalk where she had saved a stranger. And then she turned home again, the car whispering across pavement like it belonged to her all along. When she stepped out, the Fosters were still there, waiting patiently. "Well?" Laura asked with a smile. Claire looked at them, stunned. "It doesn't feel real." Marcus shrugged playfully. "That's how you know it's worth remembering." "I'll take the Tesla," she said at last, her voice barely more than a whisper. Daniel nodded. "Done. We'll handle registration, insurance, everything." "But—" Claire hesitated. "Why are you doing all of this for me?" Daniel studied her face carefully. "Because the world is better when people like you exist in it. And because sometimes, when the world forgets its heroes, someone needs to remind them they matter." Laura stepped forward again and handed Claire another card. "If you're ever ready to come back to the medical field, let us help. We know people. Hospitals that value heart as much as skill. You deserve a place that sees both." As they said their goodbyes and climbed back into their cars, Claire stood alone in the driveway, keys in her hand, Stunned, her life had turned. Upside down twice in 48 hours, once by loss and once by grace. She wasn't just a nurse anymore. She was someone who mattered.